Friends went to go get ice cream a few weeks ago. We waited in line, and when I got to the counter, I asked for a frap. The worker looked at me like I had three heads. "We serve ice cream here," she said. We don't serve caffeinated beverages." I was taken aback. In Massachusetts, whenever I went to go get ice cream, I would get a frap. I asked my friends who were primarily from New Jersey, Maryland, and Virginia if they'd ever heard of one before, and they all said no. It took some further research to find out that a frap was primarily a Massachusetts used word. Over here in North Carolina, it's just a milkshake. I did some reflection, and I'd never in my life asked for a milkshake before. I'd only ever asked for a frap. In Massachusetts, a milkshake is just a shaken mixture of milk and flavored syrup. It becomes a frap when you add ice cream to it. This is a linguistic difference between Massachusetts and pretty much the rest of the country that I've just never known. To make matters even more confusing, I go to the beach in Rhode Island a lot, and me and my family normally get ice cream on the way back. In Rhode Island, they call a frap a cabinet. That's right, a cabinet. Having grown up in Massachusetts and now being in North Carolina, I've never realized how many slang words we have that I've always considered normal. I've never thought about how geographical locations have differences in linguistic norms, and I've only recently taken an interest to it. Having come from Massachusetts and knowing the Massachusetts slang, I do feel that we have much more than any other state I've been to, and I will be listing off a few. Beginning of college, there were certain words that I knew were only prominent in Massachusetts. I thought that people knew the words but just didn't use them. My thoughts were proved wrong when on the first week of school I asked if there were any bubblers nearby. Now, it had been 100 degrees for days straight, and I just needed a drink of water. But nobody had any clue what I was talking about. I then remembered. Bubbler is used in Massachusetts, and really nowhere else in the country. This graph right here shows the distribution of how the word bubbler is used. In the western United States, it's primarily called a drinking fountain, and everywhere else it's a water fountain, except for that little part of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and a little part of Michigan, where they call it a bubbler. This is intriguing to me because these two seemingly unrelated places use the word bubbler, and I do wonder how that came to be. There are a few other words and phrases that I've used my entire life that do not seem to have made it out of Massachusetts, or at least my friends in High Point haven't heard of. Frap and bubbler are two of them. A couple other ones are shopping carriage, or as most people say, a shopping cart. Another word is cella, meaning basement, a pocketbook, which is a purse, and a rotary, which is a roundabout. And of course, everybody in Massachusetts has to throw in the word wicked when describing something. It's not only phrases, though, it's also locations, both geographical and brands. In terms of locations, when I'm talking about Cape Cod, I always say the Cape. Most people have heard of Cape Cod. I mean, the potato chip is pretty much in all supermarkets around the country. When I say the Cape, people have zero clue what I'm talking about. They think it's some article of clothing. Same thing with Martha's Vineyard. Most people know what Martha's Vineyard is, but when I'm talking about it, I say the vineyard. And most people that are not from New England have no clue what I'm talking about. There's also restaurants, gas stations, and supermarket that really only seem to be present in Massachusetts, or at least the New England area. A few weeks ago, I was talking to my friends, and I was like, man, I could really go for an Uno's Pizza right now. And they had zero clue what I was talking about. Now, of course, I knew that there were some restaurants that were only in Massachusetts, such as D'Angelo's, which makes pretty good subs. But Uno's Pizza surprised me. There are Uno's Pizzas all over Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and the Connecticut area, so I just assumed that it was a national brand. But after some research, I found out that they're headquartered in Massachusetts and didn't expand outside of New England for the most part, except for a few areas. There's a couple in Chicago, but those are outliers. In terms of gas stations, Cumberland Farms are everywhere in Massachusetts. I've never heard of most of these big gas stations down south, like Sheetz, Wawa, those types of things. It's weird to me that people buy food from these gas stations. Chicken, hot dogs, sandwiches, it grosses me out. Not what it's like in Massachusetts. Gas stations are used for gas, and then people like to buy scratch tickets and like cigarettes and stuff from there. Not food. I wouldn't dream of buying an unclosed food from a Cumberland Farms. Supermarkets are another geographical thing I found interesting because all over the country there are different brands of supermarkets that everybody from those areas finds normal. For us in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, we have Stop and Shop and we have Shaw's. Down here, there's Harris Teeter. More out west, there's Kroger's. In Florida, there's Winn-Dixie. And never heard of any of those supermarkets until I started traveling, and it blew me away. Nobody had ever heard of Stop and Shop because I always perceived it to be normal. One last trivial thing, but certainly not the last, that I found to be interesting is bottled water brands. I've always grown up with Poland Springs, and for the most part, people know what Poland Springs is. I mean, it's down here. But there's some of my friends that have never heard of it. Specifically, there's one from California who prompted me to do some more research. This map shows the plastic water company's distribution of our country. It seems to be split up into regions, the West having Arrowhead, the Midwest having Ice Mountain, the South and Pennsylvania having Deer Park, and the North, for the most part, having Poland Springs. Florida here is weird. They have Zephyr Hills, and in Texas area, they have Ozarka. All in all, differences in our country seem to be correlated to geography and regions, which I find to be interesting and would love to have concrete reasoning behind why this is. This is only scratching the surface of cultural, linguistic, and product differences. There are so many that I did not talk about, but I find this to be a good base. It's good that I'm gaining these experiences down south instead of spending all my life in Massachusetts, because I would never have realized that not everybody's life is the same as mine, and that's something worth noting. Thank you, and that concludes my multimodal essay.